This is WCNY's The Capitol Press Room, and we're joined remotely by Gwen Craig, a state government reporter for the Adirondack Explorer, who's here to talk about a state grant that never materialized for a nonprofit in the Adirondack Park, and also discuss the subsequent fallout. So, Gwen, let's rewind to early 2022 when the Adirondack Mountain Club purchased nearly 200 acres for $2.5 million, with the expectation that they would get reimbursed about 20% of the cost from a state grant. Where was this property in question, and what was the club's vision for it?
ADK purchased this ski center. It's right outside Lake Placid, so it's a very accessible area off State Route 73. The ski center itself was owned by the Jubin family. They're kind of well known in the area, and it was definitely a hopping place to be. They had a bar and a restaurant. They had miles of cross-country ski trails people really enjoyed. So I think there was a lot of excitement that the Adirondack Mountain Club had purchased it from them because it would still be, you know, an accessible place to the public. The vision ADK had was to make this place not only their offices, because they had closed their Lake George offices over the pandemic and sold them, and then had some extra money to purchase this property, but they also wanted it to be kind of a housing opportunity for some of their stewards, especially in the summer. A lot of their sort of seasonal workers were having trouble finding housing, so there's going to be a couple of places for people to stay as part of that building. They also are going to rent it out to other nonprofits, and actually the Adirondack Explorer held an event there shortly after they had purchased it. And, it was going to be a welcome center. A lot of times over the pandemic, we saw a lot of people getting out on the trails, a lot of hikers who are not well educated about what some of these hikes entailed. And so this was going to be one of those very public facing, right off the main highway there, places for people to get information, rent a bear canister if they're going out camping in the woods. There's just like a kind of one-stop shop place. So it really seemed to align with everything that ADK is all about.
And fair to say, this is not some fly by night institution or somebody who was trying to break into the area. This is a well established group that was just looking to sort of cement and grow its footprint in the region.
Oh, for sure. So ADK's been around since 1922. It's, if not the largest, one of the largest nonprofits in the park. There's a membership of over 30,000 people. There's chapters, hiking chapters all over the state. But they own the Adirondack Lodge, where a lot of people hike Heart Lake Center. They're really ingrained in the High Peaks community. So yeah, the way this all turned out was quite a surprise.
Well, let's talk about how this turned out because we're talking about a purchase that was made with the expectation from the nonprofit that they were getting $500,000 from an Environmental Protection Fund grant administered by the State Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, which actually was announced in late 2021 before they actually closed on this property. But less than 5% of that money, as you report, actually made it to the Adirondack Mountain Club. What was the
Mhm.
hang up initially? What was the problem that they were trying to overcome?
The first issue we got a pretty strong look at because the former executive director, Michael Barrett, shared with us a lot of the documentation. And so with this grant, a lot of times these monies are announced, but it's not official. It's like there's still a contract process. There's, other agreements to be worked out, and then these are reimbursement grants. So like they have to like have happened or paid out so much, and then they'll get the money from the state.
Although,
Um,
as you point out in your reporting, that didn't stop the state from ensuring that a sign was put up about EPF funding even before they had written the
yes,
check.
yes. So they gave them what former ADK board member Tom Andrews called a bone to me by giving them about 20 grand, which was toward, from what I understand, toward appraisals and things like that. But yeah, the issue that was around this property initially was a conservation easement. So the state, wants to make sure that if they're helping acquire something, that they're protecting the public's interests in it going forward. And so that was going to be in the form of a conservation easement. And initially, Michael Barrett had told us and provided some documentation to show that the state was looking at just having, public access easement to the ski trails, which made perfect sense to ADK. They were very on board with that. But then, over the years, they were getting new versions of the easement from the Parks Department, and also the Attorney General's office works on this. And the easement all of a sudden included the building, and they were finding that the Parks Department wanted pretty much full control over what happened at the building, was not interested in giving ADK any kind of say over the regular maintenance or holding meetings or things like that. Like, they would need the express written permission of the Parks Commissioner to do a lot of stuff there, which they didn't feel was very fair, considering, the cost of the grant was, as you said before, about 20% of the purchase price. So there was that's really where things were hung up. And from what I understand, a lot of that got worked out, but we haven't seen the final document. We just know that at a certain point, interim executive director Julia Gorin took over, and that's when new issues started to crop up, still with the easement, but around the mortgage as well.
Yeah, the issue that you highlight in your reporting is this issue of a subordination of mortgage, in this case involving the conservation easement to the mortgage. So essentially, that the easement, can travel with the property. The state, though, would not confirm the easement was final without the subordination of the mortgage. Kind of a catch-22 here. And my question then is, as you looked at all of these records and talked with the people who would engage with you on this sort of post-mortem autopsy, did you get the sense that the state was very flexible in this process, that they were willing to bend to the situation on the ground, or were they pretty firm in terms of what they expected and how they expected things to play out, potentially to the detriment of this initiative?
I definitely got the feeling that this was unique, and that perhaps I haven't been able to confirm this in my 6 years at the Explorer, I haven't run into this, but my kind of hunch is that because it's a nonprofit involved with this conservation easement and not like a municipality,
Mm.
that sort of has created new territory for the state to figure out how to make this work, so that they are protecting those taxpayer dollars, making sure the public's interest is protected. But at the same time, this nonprofit is investing a lot of money itself and has its own vision for the property. And it feels that ADK's change in leadership and change in board makeup as well sort of added to the length that this back and forth took. I think there were a lot of different personalities. Michael
Mm.
Barrett was a lawyer who'd worked in two gubernatorial administrations. And I think at some point I mean, if you read the letter on our website to one of the Parks Department attorneys, there's a lot of, he was just incredulous at how long this was taking, and the amount of hoops they were being asked to jump through. You could really see that the state was holding firm. I didn't get the sense that there was a lot of give and take, other than that they finally obviously gave them some money for the appraisals. But yeah, it feels, the other thing that I was sort of hearing was that this, and you could read in some of the documents from Michael Barrett, that this really kind of hindered them to be able to sort of refinance some things. And so I think they were paying quite more than they anticipated for monthly mortgage payments, longer than they anticipated. And so even though the current leadership is I believe trying to keep a good relationship with the state at this point, so they're not saying much. And that's also been kind of the hard part for this reporting, because we've had so many people in that executive director role over this last 6 years. that I think they're being careful with what they say and aren't interested in this postmortem as you called it. But yeah, I do think there was a lot of different factors that contributed it to it, and it's just very unfortunate because a lot of people I think were very surprised that this happened.
Well, you mentioned some of the documents, and if listeners want to go through some of these records that you used for your story, they should check out AdirondacKexplorer.org, and we'll also link to your reporting in the episode page for this conversation at capitalpressroom.org. But finally, what happens now? You've written that there are efforts to sell the property. They've had to lower the price and what they were looking for earlier this year. What ends up happening next? And is this going to be detrimental to the future of the Adirondack Mountain Club, or does it have, a strong enough foundation moving forward that it's not going to be handicapped by this experience?
Well, I mean, I certainly hope not. The current leadership says they're going to be redirecting kind of their focus on their other existing properties, which are still, well used, very popular. And I think that's going to continue. I do think that the ski center, who knows what its future is, and I think that's a great disappointment to the community who are used to going there. And it's the ADK had to chop the price down by $900,000. It's still for sale as far as I know, and it's definitely kind of blight there. I drove by it the other day, and it's like the icicles are hanging off. Like you can tell no one's been there, and it's just such a shame because it was a very well used. I've skied there before. The trails are wonderful, and I think the community would be hopeful to have someone else come in there and hopefully keep it a ski center. But obviously, if someone wants to do something else there, you'll just have to keep track of that.
Well, we've been speaking with Gwen Craig. She's a state government reporter for the Adirondack Explorer. Gwen, thanks so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Support for the Capitol Press Room comes from O'Donnell and Associates, a public affairs firm providing strategic guidance to businesses and nonprofits on navigating policy and regulatory issues. More information is available at o'donnellsolutions.com.